Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dania. As always, if any of the material in this podcast resonates with you and you are looking for coaching services, please feel free to contact me. I can be found on Instagram at unoyazen, or you can email me directly, lifecoaching@unoyazen.com. For this week's episode, I'm really excited to have Mike Campbell join me today. Mike Campbell is from MC Coaching. He's a men's coach working with men to build better relationships with themselves. Mike and I talk about how men can improve relationships with other men, with their partners, and most importantly, with themselves. We discuss how essential it is for men to truly build a relationship with themselves so they can be better men in all their other relationships. I really hope you enjoy this episode, and if at the end you could leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. All right, Mike, thank you again for joining the Easy Conversations podcast. I'm super grateful that you took the time today and came here to have this conversation with me. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have and some of the topics that we're going to discuss. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity for the listeners that are not familiar with your work and who you are to kind of talk about what it is you do and also where you're located, because that is also important. So yeah, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Vic. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here and have a chat, an easy conversation. So my name's Mike, and for those who potentially recognize the genre of my accent, I'm a New Zealander. Now I'm in New Zealand. I normally live in Australia in the Gold Coast, but with the current times and all that kind of stuff, my wife and I had a little Bubba last year, our daughter in the middle of the year around COVID, and so all the borders closed, all that kind of stuff, all of our family back here in New Zealand. So they reached a point where we kind of figured, I can't wait for the government to make a decision for me in terms of when things open. So let's go back to New Zealand and see our family. So we've kind of been here for a while, and now we're somewhat stuck here because the borders are closed again. So I am in New Zealand, but this is kind of my hood, let's call it, New Zealand and Australia. So yeah, the work I do, I'm a men's coach, is the simplest way I describe it. Fundamentally, I help everyday men get the shit together, really, so they can get more from life, from love, and day. And yeah, there's, I suppose, lots that comes into that, but that's the start of it. So I can keep going, or if you want to me to direct it in any way.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And not to say, like, I think we all kind of need to get our shit together at different times and points in our life. But what is it that you help men? Like, if someone's struggling, or they really need to, focus on certain areas, what are some of the things you do to help men really put it all together, especially in the aspect of relationships? Because I think personally, especially right now, we could talk about this for hours, but especially in this pandemic, men have learned a lot about themselves, and they're also trying to figure out how they can show up in relationships. So, I just want to maybe dive into that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's lots of challenges that are present right now, but at the same time, we've always got challenges, right? And I think that's one of the things that's important for us to establish. I talk about getting your shit together. It's not it never is the idea of that it's a magic point that we get to.
Mm-hmm.
We've all got shit, and for me, that's kind of one of the fundamental things that I want to be okay, and for men to realize and accept. And it's one of the things that I've seen, kind of time and time again. I said before, I work with everyday men, like, who isn't that? But what I kind of mean by that is, dudes who aren't necessarily into personal development in a big way, or the spiritual side of things, they're everyday dudes, out this part of the world. I would say things like they're tradies, they're tradesmen, they are, bankers, they, work in mines, they're teachers, they're entrepreneurs, whatever. But one of the things that I see is very common is that we've developed this idea that we need to kind of be like amazingly ever present, like all capable, everything to everyone Superman. And nothing can affect us, and we should be able to just be successful and happy, and in that we lose us, because anything that doesn't fit into this mold of the perfect man, essentially, that is, capable of everything, we kind of shame and brush away into the darker corners. And so therefore this idea that anything beneath that isn't necessarily going to be accepted or approvable, and that's kind of my shit, and I need to hide that. And so we do, right? And so we live this life where we're kind of keeping our shit in the shadows, and everyone's doing that, but we don't connect to the fact that everyone else is doing that. So we just think, I'm the only one here who's got this shit. And as men, we don't have this culture where it's normalized to connect with our mates and our brothers and be real and talk below the surface. And so we kind of miss that everyone else has got shit too. And we don't need to connect and live perhaps at that level, but when we can be real and connect with those around us, especially our brothers, I say that both in a literal sense, but also, our friends and our mates, and talk about our shit. We can actually navigate it and work through it and not be so held by it, because we often think, like for those who are listening, I've got a wardrobe next to me here, right? And we often think a closet, if I just dump my shit in the closet there, then it's fine, it's out of the way, but it's not. It's running the show from behind the scenes, it's pulling the strings. And so if we want to not be so kind of beholden to our shit, and we have to look at it. We have to deal with it. And so for me, that's kind of the idea of getting your shit together. Right? It's not a magical point in time where I become this perfect human. No, a lot of the time it's simply acceptance of some shit and exploring it and dealing with it and working to kind of get past it and overcome it, so it no longer has the same maybe power and hold over us, and we change our relationship to it. And I can become more capable in the face of it and how it gets triggered in my life and so on. So, one of the simple things there is looking at that. That's the first starting point.
And I think an important thing to note also is the fact that, it's a lifelong journey, right? You're never going to not have shit to deal with. But the more you normalize it, the more you're willing to accept it, the easier it becomes. And that's what I've found is the more I can talk about it and the more I'm vulnerable about it, the less it has power over my life, and the more choices I have and more control I have in that aspect.
And I think that's part of the point, is that we want to be able, because now there's this new thing that men need to be vulnerable and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yes, but not to be mistaken with living in that place, right? There's this, element of like addressing and exploring and pragmatically overcoming and working through, so that I can grow, right? We always have shit, but the more we learn to grow past the stuff that is and was there, the new levels we reach, right? And so new levels equals new challenges, equals a different kind of shit, right? But let's say, I get to the age of 22, and I think this is a mistake that we've really kind of made and perpetuated, is that like you become an adult and then you're done, your growth is done, forgetting that, of course, like growth is the human experience. But if I get to that point and there's some shit that I've been through in the past, maybe a really bad breakup or some stuff from my childhood or whatever, or I was bullied, horrendously at school or whatever, and I'm like, well, I don't want to deal with that stuff. I'm just going to go through life trying to, grow or improve or be successful, but I haven't dealt with that. Then at 30, at 40, that's still the shit in my closet that I haven't dealt with. So I can never get to the point of facing new shit. That's still the stuff running the show beneath the surface, right? So once I can deal with it, and that's the idea with being vulnerable, is on one level, vulnerability is asking you to be honest. And in this sense, it's asking you to be honest with yourself. Like, what haven't I dealt with that I could do with dealing with, so I can become stronger and more capable mentally, emotionally, and physically to deal with it and move past it and be able to deal with greater challenges in life. That's the simplicity of it. And
for sure,
the earlier point, a lot of that ends up being in our relationships, not just romantic, but but
Yeah.
how we relate with others.
For sure. And there's a couple of things I want to further explore with you that you touched on. The first one is really around connecting with other people, especially men. And I find that to be very therapeutic when you can find that trust and safe space with other men of vulnerability. I think as men, we can hold each other accountable. And I think there's less, personally, I believe there's less emotions and personalization involved when you're talking to other men. Whereas if you're talking to, your romantic partner, it's easy to take things personally. But what's your perspective on the ability of men to connect with other men and really build that foundation of trust and vulnerability, and be held accountable so they can be their better selves when they're in relationships?
Yeah, I mean, where I would start with that is like, man, I just think it's absolutely vital. And we, as like a lot of the work that I've done in the past has been around like starting the conversation. So, for example, I've for a while had this organization, let's call it, called Beyond the Beers, and for those who don't speak Kiwi, we pronounce beer every type of iteration of that the same way. So I'm talking about the drink Beyond the Beers, and the idea is about taking a beer with mates to new depths and actually talking about the shit that matters, because we tend to not really do that. And a lot of us have male relationships and friendships where it's just on the surface. It's banter. It's talking about women and cars and movies and whatever, and that stuff is beautiful and it's healthy, and it's being kept honest, like, and then sometimes that goes too far when there's a cost, right? Someone gets picked on, but that stuff is beautiful and healthy. But we need to be able to go beyond that. But we've never really learned that that's acceptable or doable. We haven't had it modeled to us, and when we connect to, like if we go way back, from a kind of point of evolution, men were always going out together in groups and hunting, and that was a bonding thing. But it wasn't just that. You had to be bonded because it was, like, in some sense, life or death. It was providing for you and the people who mattered to you and your community and your tribe, and that meant a lot of things. It meant that you need to be able to communicate. It meant that you need to have integrity, and your brother can depend on you. There has to be some accountability there. And if things don't go right, we need to be able to sit around the fire, around the hearth, and talk about that. What went wrong? What was our part in that? And so we don't have that by and large anymore, right? Because in that is obviously, young men being witness to that, learning it, and developing into men who can then take on that role. Yeah, we don't really have those things anymore, right? So when all we have is the surface relationships and banter, it lacks depth. And I would put it to most men that they want depth in their lives. So we need to be able to go to our depths individually in our relationships and with the men in our lives. So that's pretty important, right?
Yeah.
And so what can that look like? Now, I suppose I should point out another thing, and that is a lot of men don't even have the surface level relationships with other men. They have very few friendships or connections in general, or they have them with women. Why? Because it's easier. Maybe they've grown up, to not having strong males around, or males around at all. They grew up with sisters and mothers that kind of, they became the golden child, and their emotions were always taken care of. And so they've always gone to the feminine for approval and a sense of importance and reassurance, all this kind of stuff. So we have to understand that any individual needs modeling of masculine and feminine, and most definitely a boy and a man needs modeling and interaction with the masculine, so that we can learn what that is. We can develop it. So that's like the simple way I would look at it to start with, from a foundational aspect. And then that looks like so many things, but there's so much power in being seen by other men, being witnessed by other men, because, and you said the term before, that's kind of safe container. And this is one of those challenging things, like, I would say that term, like, men need safe spaces. And then, there's a big movement where you would say men don't need safe spaces. Men have had the rub of the green for so long. It's like, yeah. And it's been all mostly like unhealthy, immature, adolescent version of masculinity and connecting. And guess what? As a world, we're paying the prices for that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
our relationships, our family systems are paying the price for that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things I've noticed, and I think you touched on it briefly as well, is the fact that a lot of men, and myself included, at certain points in my life, I didn't prioritize that time with other men. You know, I
Mm,
didn't set it aside, and often, to your point, you know, those relationships were superficial. We were talking about sports or,
mm,
you know, what was going on in our lives, but we weren't really getting into the depths of our emotions and the
mm,
struggles we were having on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's when you get to that depth of conversation and you prioritize that time, that's where it becomes really important to have other men in your life. And
mm,
I see that quite often, you know, and it's easy, like, you know, you're in a relationship, you start having kids, it's really hard to make time for that stuff. But I think
mm.
it's equally important to do so, so you can be a different version when you do come home to your wife or your
Yeah,
spouse or your children.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think of it as like medicine in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Like it's part of a healthy diet, quote unquote. You know, it's nourishing mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? Um, and so that's yeah, we haven't had the importance on it, and you know, we could look at many reasons. Some of them we've kind of discussed, but also other points, like, you know, as you say, like, might not be everyone's existence, but let's say you're in a relationship, and certainly in that kind of heteronormative sense, there's, if the mode has been for a long time, both maybe for you individually and in the collective, what you've seen is, you know, boys will be boys and go out and get pissed with your mates and just be lads and all that. Again, I want to be clear, like, I'm not shaming that stuff and
Mm-hmm.
judging that stuff. It's so fucking healthy to
Mm-hmm.
have that level of connection and camaraderie, right? Because there's a beauty to it. And there is an accountability to it, but we need to be able to go to the depths. But if that's been the only existence, then we have these kind of dialogues that exist, which is very adolescent. And I don't, again, say that in a judgmental way. We haven't moved past that adolescent psychology where, you know, I want to go out and get some time away from the missus or the relationship and go and, you know, like play up with the boys, whatever that is. And so I need to get permission and all this kind of stuff, versus here's something that I need for myself
Mm-hmm.
to nourish me as a human.
Yeah.
So I can be my best, so I can show up and give my best in the relationship. Now, what does that stuff entail, right? Many things, but again, being real, being open, being honest, seen, witnessed, you know. And one of the reasons that we don't do that is because that sounds fucking terrifying
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of men who've never had that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we struggle to even give a really honest answer to our friends who
Yeah.
we are loyal and have relationships with, about how we are and what's going on in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're so terrified a lot of the time of that potentially being used against us, or me being judged and seen as weak or not man enough or something like that, fill in the blank. So we don't do it. And of course we haven't, you know, had it modeled. But when you can step into an environment where you can, like, it is entirely safe for you, all of you, to be seen and witnessed and held, and that to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
One, it tells you that it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Two, it makes it okay to keep exploring a safe environment with other men where you truly feel safe to be seen. You know, your heart, your softness can be seen, and that be okay. Not only does it tell you that it's okay, but it tells you okay to that it's okay to explore it. And that happens when it's been led and supported and by other men and so on. But not only that, when I allow myself to be seen, all of me, my challenges, my struggles, my insecurities, in a safe environment with other men who are there as well, right, are in it with me, there's that invitation to grow and do something about it. And that's where that accountability, as you said, that accountability comes in, right? Like being held accountable. Well, we see you, you're loved, you're seen, you're worthy, all these things. And like, to make a short point, what do you need to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
We've got your back. How can we support you? What can we hold you accountable to? And that, again, sounds very terrifying if you've never had that level of accountability. And I would put it to any man listening who might feel a little bit uncomfortable or challenged by that. That is a big red alarm showing you that that's what you need. Like if nothing else, you need that. We
Yeah.
need it as men.
Yeah.
We most definitely do. And again, I'll finish that point by looping back on, like from a very basic instinctual evolutionary standpoint, the masculine, the hunter in us needs that level of accountability, because that shit is life and death at a very, very primal level for us. And that's why we talk about purpose, and integrity being so important for me, because it connects us to our roots. And you can get that in many environments, and you can access some of that alone. And you can most certainly access some of that in women, with the presence of women, the feminine, but there's nothing that matches it like the presence of other men.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I guess for men that are wondering how they can get that, I think, most places nowadays have a lot of men's group that their sole purpose is to have these conversations and have that environment where everyone can come and sit in a circle and have these conversations. So there are a lot of avenues there. There's also with technology today, there's virtual men's groups. So there's tons of it out there where there's no judgment, no shame involved, very open environment where everyone's welcome. So, I would encourage anyone listening who is seeking this or doesn't know how to find it to go search for it, because it's there.
Yeah. And also I'll give you a really easy one that we often look past, and that is your existing male friendships. They're there, but it just needs someone to start it.
Yeah.
And so here's a really simple way that I'll play that out for you. As men, we often have this thing about loyalty. It's very high value for a lot of men in my experience. I believe we tend to have it misconstrued a little bit. We tend to be loyal to other things external to us over our own values and our own needs and wants. And that's not quite loyalty. But let's utilize that loyalty that we have to others. So I would say this: most men who have, mates and friends, but they don't necessarily go a bit deeper and have that level of like, whew, I feel seen and held and valued, right? It is most of us, if our mate came to us and they were like, hey, Fakan, I'm struggling like with this thing, in my relationship, and I don't know what to do about it. Can you help me? Most of us would be like, yeah, man, I'll help. Like, how can I support you? We are ready and waiting to support and help our mates. So notice that we're all ready and waiting.
Yeah.
It just needs someone to start it. You know what, dude? This is where I'm at. You asked me how I am, and if it's okay with you, I'd love to share, like, for real, how I am and what's going on. Can you handle that? Just listen. I don't need solutions. And maybe you can bounce back some ideas.
Yeah.
That's fucking easy.
Yeah.
It's sitting there waiting for us. So I want to be clear on that, because, it's such a beautiful point that you make. There's opportunities everywhere and often right in front of us.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. And for again, just for men that are, if your friend comes to you, just again, I think our typical tendency is to go into fix-it mode. And quite often, men and women included, when they just want to be heard, they just want to be heard. So I like stressing that point, because myself included, I just want to find a solution, right? So
and often to the point as well, even before that, is, the person starting it, we won't start it until we think that, okay, now the only option is, some great drastic solution, right? And so I've tried and I've held off as long as I can, like there's some badge of honor to that. There's not. That there's no prize at the end of your life for suffering in silence the most. There's not. But maybe we could do with not carrying as much shit around, right? Lighten the load a little bit.
Yeah. Be proactive. It's like taking your car for service. Don't wait till the lights go off.
Except, like way more complex and way more important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the other thing I wanted to touch on, and you talked about it also, was relationships. And I find that very important, because there's quite often we carry a lot of baggage or trauma from childhood, and that presents itself in different ways in our relationships. So how, and doing that inner work is so important, so you can show up as your whole self in a relationship Again, just want to get your thoughts on that and what your perspective is.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So, like one of the things I said at the top, like I'm a men's coach. I don't consider myself to be a relationship coach, but I work with men fundamentally with their and on their relationship with themselves. Any relationship that we have is going to be a reflection of the relationship with ourselves, and therefore be limited, by our ability to connect and create relationships with others, romantic or otherwise, business, etc., is going to be limited by the depth of the relationship I have with myself. And so that's often the work that we might end up doing. And of course, that cascades out into the rest of our lives. And I think we would be foolish to think that romantic relationships aren't a huge important part of our lives for most individuals. Maybe not you right now, but at some point most people want to couple and create companionship and that kind of thing. So it's worthwhile giving some attention to, right? But yeah, I think there's many things perhaps that we didn't learn at school, but one of them is how to relate to other humans and how to deal with your own shit so we can better relate to other humans and navigate the world. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's such important work for us as individuals. And then obviously for a relationship, if that happens, and then, a family unit, like the relationship with self predicates the relationship I have, which then predicates the family environment, and then the broader, wider family and community. And that's why I think the work for a man as an individual has such flow on effect. But often where a lot of our shit presents is in our romantic relationships. Yes. Right? Where we get triggered, and, there's a quote, that comes to mind from a gentleman called Francis Weller. And he says, I think it was him, or at least he was quoting someone else. And it's this: to ripen. And, there's a lot of people, I think, it's popular these days, I suppose, to do some work on yourself and all that kind of stuff. And we can often get into the idea of, I need to heal and like do all of this work myself, and then I can go and get into a relationship or whatever. And it's like, maybe there's some shit that you've got to deal with. Like if you've been jumping from relationship to relationship, or always, having the same patterns in relationships, like stop for a bit and deal with some stuff. But all of our shit has come about in some form in relationship to others. So some of that crucial healing and growth is also going to need to happen in relationship to others. And the idea of like love invites us to ripen is like, we're this thing that comes into a relationship, and then there's so much room and opportunity and I suppose like asking for our growth in that container. And so, all of our shit will be poked and prodded and triggered, and we can keep reacting to those things and try and build a relationship and create a relationship. Or as you said before, we can be proactive and grow past those things together as we co-create this thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the misconception, I think you touched on it as well, is this idea that I need to heal before I can go into a relationship. And to your point, yeah, there's a certain extent of healing you need to do, obviously, because if there's, to your point, constant things that keep coming up, you need to heal those. But you really don't know other parts of yourself that you need to heal until you're triggered. And quite often, we aren't triggered until we are in a romantic relationship, like you said. And then you start realizing, holy crap, there's all these things that are triggering me. What is the source? What is the root? And, I like to use that sports analogy, is where, your coach can sit there and come up with a game plan, but you won't really know how you're going to perform until you go execute it, right? And that's, you could do all this healing, but until you're not really in that situation where you're being triggered, you don't know how you're going to show up. And I find, to your point, relationships are an amazing reminder of the constant work we need to do on ourselves. But, I think personally, in my opinion, you come as two independent people that are doing their own work, but at the same time, you also grow together, like you said, in that container.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, right? And, you know, the other, I suppose, iteration of what you said that came to mind for me was they're a constant reminder of who you are,
Yes.
if you're willing to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy for us to, as people, but I do see this as a pattern in a lot of men who haven't learnt the stuff, had it modeled wonderfully, and haven't gone to the extent of like giving a shit about it and investing in it, to place it on the other, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, they're doing this. And so, for example, I had a client of mine message me earlier today. And, you know, this is a wonderful dude. And, you know, he's really diving into his work, and he sees, this is often the case I see for a lot of men, you know, like, first of all, I hear from so many women who are like, I want my man to do this work. How do I get him to do this work? That's the predominant kind of faction of that. But then the men who do come into my work, my major coaching program, often there's the other way, like, oh, it's my partner. And quite often, to our earlier point, the men in their lives. So here's a dude who he's now seeing, right? Like, when we don't know a lot of this stuff, we're ignorant to some degree, and then you open your eyes to it, you have all these awarenesses. All of a sudden, it can be quite overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes quite distressing and off-putting. Like, oh, I see all the shit that I'm doing, and I don't have the tools or the know-how to fix it or adjust it or whatever yet. And I see it in others. And this is a great case for this guy. He's doing such amazing work, you know, in his own life. And he's looking at his friends, you know, his brothers, and he's seeing the patterns and stuff in them. And so he doesn't want to fix it for them, but he wants to support them. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a fucking good friend. You know, he's loyal, all the stuff that we just discussed.
Yeah.
And he asked me, and he was like, hey, my good mate, you know, he's just had a baby with his partner, and so, you know, they're navigating all of the challenges of that, and he's finding that she's being like really cutting and biting and nagging and like, you know, at him a lot on the smallest things. And so he was coming to me for some advice, like, what can he do? and I said to him, look, you know how it works with me. Like, I'm not going to give you one simple solution, because there isn't a simple solution to this.
Right.
The answer to this is the work.
Mm-hmm.
If he wants that to change, then he gets to look at, how do I change this?
Mm-hmm.
Not in that instant, here's a fix for that dynamic in our relationship.
Right.
But how do I understand me and how I'm showing up and creating some of this, and then understand her and what's going on for her in this, so we can then come to the table and work as teammates. I was like, so I said to him, you know this in part, that the answer for him is to do this work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To be his best, to understand him, to understand her, to understand relationship dynamics, to understand, improve his capability in communication, and where his triggers are coming off, and why maybe her triggers are. That's the work here.
Yeah.
You know, it's not waiting till a relationship has ended and going, fuck, I don't want to have that again. Or it's at rock bottom. It's going, this could be better.
Yeah.
Let me lead that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the common narrative, at least what I've seen, is quite often people sit there and wait for their partner. It's like, if my partner starts doing this, then I'll start doing this. And again, you can sit there and wait for the rest of your life, or you can take that charge, right? And I find it often, it's very conditional. It's, I need A to happen before I do this. So, you know, what again, like, do you see that quite often with the work you're doing?
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, there's, I mean, first of all, if we haven't made it clear, relationships are complex and challenging, right? And so, you know, I think one of the things that has been a tricky tightrope, and you know, maybe a little bit of a consequence of, you know, like a monumentally important rise of the feminine and women inequality. So let's be super clear on that.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of men, there's been a muddying of the waters of like, what the fuck is my role?
Mm-hmm.
How do I do this? And so what I see for a lot of men is a discomfort, essentially, and an inability, and often therefore an unwillingness to take the lead in their relationships, to take action, to make decisions, to set a direction, right? Like to show up with purpose and give their partner something to rely on. And so often there's that kind of passivity there. You know, the waiting, the hoping, the subtle suggestions, the loud sighing, you know, like, oh, hopefully if I sigh enough, they'll notice and inquire and change their behaviors or something. Like, fucking hell. Equality doesn't mean sit back and sigh and hope your partner does the emotional labor for you. That's not equality, actually. You know, so, but there's, again, it's complex, right? But I see that, I believe that kind of thing has led to that a little bit, where a lot of men are a bit afraid to be more decisive and direct. And by that, I don't mean dominating and domineering in their relationships. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that waiting.
Yeah.
And maybe with that, as you said, the conditional, you know, if, when, but also I think in that there's like the individual's insecurities and so on. Like, but what if I lead or ask or direct or something and it's not picked up on, it's not received, then I face rejection. And even though if we're single and the idea of being rejected by someone we don't know is large, you don't know them. Like,
yeah.
But the idea of being rejected by the person that we are most invested in carries so much more weight. So I think that's a big part of that as well.
Yeah, no, and thank you for breaking it down that way. I think there is a huge component of the whole equality place because men have they're confused too, right? And I think ultimately you have to take charge if you want to see change. The last thing I wanted to
and so to put a term on that, because again, I know it's nuanced and it can be really challenging, and we want black or white answers. Okay, so so please don't take away from this. I need to take charge of my relationship, and if you don't know what that is, it clumsy and ineffective. But how can I lead? And I think that's something that invites perhaps more curiosity, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. Because part of that, I would say, is like leading the conversation, like about that with your partner. Like, hey, I see this, and I know sometimes I struggle to lead a conversation, or I wait, you know, as you said, right? I might be hoping that you see something in me and you make a decision and then I can change or whatever. I'd like for that to change. How can we do that together? Like, that's how you can lead it, you know, like actually have the conversation about it with your partner. Sorry. What are you doing?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think, you know, in terms of like bringing it full circle, you know, we've talked about men's relationship with other men, men's relationship with their partners. And the last piece I wanted to touch on, and you've said the work you really do is helping men in their relationships with themselves. And what are some of the things men need to be mindful of when it comes to, you know, having that relationship with themselves, you know? And some of the things I talk about is, again, that whole concept of self-love, but that's, you know, it's thrown around a lot. And I just want to get your thoughts on what does that truly look like, and what are some of the things you're doing with the men you're working with?
Yeah, so it's a great point, and it is something to really explore, because you know, it's like the term "just be yourself." You know, there's terms like this that we have in the world of personal development, which it can sound great, you know, on an Instagram post and look good, you know, done on some fancy piece of wood up on the wall. But what the fuck does it mean? You know, like the masculine needs pragmatism, right? So the relationship with myself, you know, like, just be yourself. You know, I've heard these kind of cynical things in the past. I probably said them myself a long time ago. Like, I'm me. Who else would I be? You know, like, okay, cool. The relationship with myself, like, what do you mean? Like, you know, slipping out the back and kind of getting one off. No, it's understanding yourself. You know, like, who are you? Now, that's a question that I ask and have asked many men, but I ask every man who comes into my coaching environment, like my major coaching program, Everyday Legends Academy. It's the first module. We look at that for 2 weeks. But fundamentally, we're answering that question for the 6 months of the program. Who are you? And I think about it like this. One, that turns out to be a very challenging and often very confronting question for a lot of men.
Yeah.
And then I think too, I mean, I'm 39 and a fair bit. So I've been me my whole life. And you would think if there's one question, it's that question. But we often don't. We're often terrified. We don't know how to answer it. We don't even know where to start. We often start with the things that we've collected or where we happen to be born or born into. And they don't tell us anything about you, the individual. So that's really what I mean when we start with that relationship to self. Like, do you really know yourself, who you are, what you're about, what you want? Like, what do you value? What do you give a shit about? What terrifies you? What are your insecurities? What are the root of those? Why do you keep doing that frustrating thing that you say to yourself, don't do that? Or why don't you do that thing that you know you want to do, but you never do it? Like, understand yourself. So for me, that's really what it is predicated in terms of building that relationship with self. In a simple term, it's building self-awareness. Now, then there's this idea of like self-love again, which is, fluffy, I think, and it struggles to really connect for a lot of guys. So here's where I'll connect it for you. Self-respect. Do you respect yourself? Now, I want to invite everyone to maybe go away from this and really sit with that, because I feel like it's the kind of question that's really easy to answer like very quickly on the surface. Yeah, of course I do. Or maybe no, I don't. Let's really explore it, because self-love and whatever, you might get a list of 10 things in a post about it, what those things are. They all require me to have respect for myself, enough to value myself, to fucking look after myself and do things that are for me, that nourish me, that put me in environments that challenge me with other men, relationships that will invite me to grow, all these, whatever it is, all these things. Eat decent food, exercise and move my body, get some fresh air, meditate, like whatever those things are. Allow myself to sit down and relax and not have to be working and creating and building all the time. So for me, that's kind of where I base things like self-love and self-care is respecting yourself in the way and this is a simple connection, I think, for a lot of men, respecting yourself in the way that you hope other people will respect you, or that you're maybe living your life so that other people will respect you. First, show yourself and the world that you have that level of respect for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that also comes with like firm boundaries and stuff like that, modeling behavior of how you want to be treated. And I guess the whole understanding yourself aspect, that also changes over time, right? Like, if you become a father, that's going to change. You start a new job, that's going to change. So I think that in itself is part of your journey of growth, and it's something you need to be asking yourself quite frequently, because that answer may change at times. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, of course. As we said earlier, the human experience is change and growth. So that's always kind of growing. And, we've kind of, I think maybe perpetuated and celebrated this idea that, if you work hard enough in life, you can get to a point and things are okay. But the moment we try and get to a point where now everything's fine, life will grow past you. But that doesn't mean, of course, that we should never stop, smell the roses and celebrate life. Of course, please do that. Most definitely do that. But that the journey continues, that we continually grow and evolve. And I think simultaneously become more complex and simple, and be in constant conversation and relationship with and inquiry with yourself.
Absolutely. Mike, I want to thank you again for coming on here and sharing your insight and wisdom. Really appreciate it. For listeners that want to find you or get a hold of you, can you share some of the best ways that they can find you or get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me, online, Mike Campbell. It's a somewhat of a common name, but mikecampbell.com.au. I don't tend to have Google nailed, and when I say that, it's because there's a famous musician who tends to nail all of that. But yeah, otherwise, Instagram, Mike Campbell MC. Find me there, and everything else is kind of clicked off there. And like if you've got questions and so on, come and ask. DMs and Instagram is the best place. I'm very passionate about this work and supporting everyday men. And so I love, engagement and getting questions. And I know for a lot of guys, that's daunting. It's challenging, to even reach out and put your hand up. And that's why my work will always, hopefully, and aim to be simple and accessible for men to take the step and go, let's do something. Let's, become who I can become. So that might be a simple message. Send it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you again for coming on here. And I'm super grateful. So yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks
for having me, Fakan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Beautiful.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. As always, please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the episodes, or leave a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. Thank you again, and until next week.